Yes, hello everyone and welcome to By the Numbers. It is back. We had our Patreon goals met, so that's it. Like we agreed on our one-off Rostermania show, if there was enough money to justify getting out of bed, we would indeed get out of bed, stay all the way out of bed, and make a podcast. Me and Duncan are back to do it, so super hyped. It's a real show. We're all paid up for the month, so you're getting at least 4, unless you sneaky chargeback fuckers decide to inundate us. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah. So look, let's start by talking about how this show got made, because obviously it's a big shout out to all the Patreon backers. We're going to name the big donors and stuff at the end as per our agreement. And if you're one of the $100 or more donators, you will get to ask a question at the end of the show. So if you're in the Twitch chat, send those to Sam now. But like, just the idea of even getting this show made, like as I said, the first thing I noticed, Duncan, was criticisms. Because everyone, well, not everyone, but there was a small vocal percentage of people going, why should we pay you money to make this show?
Yeah.
How greedy it is of you to demand some sort of exchange of money for time. Like, I was like, is this fucking real life? You know, like, as if we don't already have very full fucking schedules and like travel on the weekends or shoot TV shows and ancillary content for a TV network or write columns for a website. You know, the idea that like on the 1 or 2 days off a week I've got, I should make this show out of the kindness of my heart because, you know, hey, me and Duncan having such a good time, really. You know, I couldn't even believe that as a criticism, you know?
Especially because that fucker who said that didn't presumably donate, but he now gets to enjoy all the episodes if he wants. So
yeah,
because
exactly.
Someone else paid, this kind of complained about, he now gets the show as well. Is there no way to contact that guy and IP ban him, Rich, from ever getting the video?
This is the thing, though. I almost, like, in just a moment of spite, I just wanted to pay everybody back, you know, like, just fuck it then, we're not doing it, actually.
You didn't, though. You didn't, of course.
Yeah. No, I took the money, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Talking with that cash immediately, yeah, absolutely.
Straight in the bank, that.
So then this was the other thing that really pissed me off about trying to get the show made. The moderators on the subreddit just decided out of the fucking blue that this Patreon was going to be removed. And there was no rules to support this. They had like 2 rules that like vaguely maybe if you did mental gymnastics, you know, fitted the criteria. It was like you can't explicitly ask for donations. Well, linking to a Patreon doesn't do that, does it? And we're just saying, hey, the Patreon's there. If you want, you know, if you want to donate, you can. No one's explicitly asking for anything. We certainly weren't putting the Patreon on there. I physically can't do that. So there was that. And then on top of that, there was like some other fucking rule where it was like, linking to any fundraising or shops or anything like that. And here's the thing, that is not a rule they've ever enforced up until now. They can say they have, they can pretend they have, but now they're going to have to enforce it all the time. And I feel sorry for the people that have been caught up as collateral damage in this crossfire of just mods just fucking having a fucking mental breakdown because they're on the mod spectrum. They're at the far end of the fucking spectrum, you know? Where like JDM, who launched a merchandise store. Like I want JDM to do well as a player. I like JDM. He's a nice guy, model professional. I want him to get paid if people want to buy his lounging t-shirts or whatever the fuck. Can't advertise that. Can't even tell you it exists now on a subreddit because of this bullshit. And charities, right? There's going to be some kid who can't pay for his fucking medical bills and people are going to be, hey, we're doing a charity stream to save this kid's life. And the mod's going to have to go, well, we didn't allow the By the Numbers fundraiser, so you die now. Goodbye. And they may as well go to the hospital and pull a fucking life support machine.
I like the way you've gone full, like, people who are against, like, Obamacare getting taken away. Like, you're killing my kids! You kill people!
Hey, I'll go SJW when it fucking suits me, son. You know what I mean? So absolutely fucking ridiculous, isn't it, though? What have they done that for? And here's the thing, I'll link these to Sam now so you can just bring them up while you talk about how fucking retarded the whole thing was. Is people doing literal Kickstarters. I went through... I've done my fucking homework here. These mods are out of control. Rise up! Exactly. We got to resist. We got to fight. Right, just have a look at these. But yeah, I can't believe it. Like we could have knocked this fucking Patreon out of the park in 2 days instead of having to bore people by retweeting it and stuff. If it had just gone on the subreddit, which is the fucking CS community, you know what I mean? Yeah, I am triggered. I'm triggered. Like,
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
I had noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, I am triggered. Yeah.
Not even slightly triggered, Duncan. This was potentially eating a paycheck.
Yeah, it was mental. Like that's an example of where, like, sadly this is an ongoing thing that we found, but it's sort of the last 3 months that all these things have flared up. And I have to say, what it's made me realize is, like, this will sound like a weird point, but the problems that we've had in the League of Legends subreddit have nothing to do with the game League of Legends. No. Like, it's just about how mods act on big subs on Reddit. Because, for example, I used to always think, like, wow, the actual CSGO mods are pretty cool compared to all these ones that we're having all these massive problems with League of Legends. But I've just noticed as the sub gets bigger and bigger, and especially here's a key element, as you get new mods, it's just like an infestation. Like, if people wonder why we go on in our, and every now and then about social justice warrior stuff, right? Most people think, well, that's not relevant to my life. No, you don't understand. That's why we're getting so ham about it now. Because it used to be some guy in a university. Now, those people are slowly infesting all these institutions that will impact your life. And the problem is, by not knowing about this issue, you'll think to yourself, what most people do, like, well, I'm sure they're all just reasonable people. It's like, no, that's kind of the point we're making here. They're being unreasonable, you know.
They're beyond unreasonable. I mean, they're just not reasonable people at all. I mean, look, I'll tell you some fucking stories, and I won't go into too much details because it is a CS podcast. It's effectively like not just bitching about our Patreon didn't get on the subreddit, but I will self-indulgently.
Still did raise all the money, like,
this is what you paid for.
Enough. I had to tweet.
This is what you really paid for, guys. So, you know,
15 minutes of hate at the beginning.
Yeah, I had a fucking nightmare with them, mate. Like, when there was stuff getting removed, like they were just removing videos. For example, you know, I did a video trying to notify people about certain gambling sites. Now, they have a rule where it's like you're not allowed to post about scams. Right? Okay. That's what they say. And you can't post about gambling sites and stuff. That cannot apply to everybody. Because, like, you know, so what if a journalist wants to inform the community, like, look after yourselves, protect yourselves, you're going to delete that. So that you're actually going to assist the thieves and the liars by denying people access to that information, you know? So obviously you have to apply common sense. But I have banged my head against that fucking brick wall with these retarded moderators over and over again. And, oh, yeah, we had to delete your video because it's about gambling. It's not about gambling. It's not me opening cases all fucking day with my dick out or something, is it? I'm sick. I don't know why I added that bit. But,
that would be unreasonable.
That definitely would be unreasonable. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to tell people, like, this case opening site is a scam. If you go and you use it, then you're going to get fucking fleeced, aren't you? And that's all the video is. And they were deleting them and removing them. So then they said to me, one mod said, add me on Steam. So I added them on Steam, started talking with them. And I was like, look, you're just being a fucking cunt. You know what I mean? Like, just stop overthinking things. This is how moderators tie themselves up in knots. You think you're important. You're not. You're a janitor. You volunteered for it. Stop trying to make rules up so you feel important. Just apply common sense. That's all you have to do. Anyway, they screenshotted all of my objections without telling me about it on my Steam account, and then uploaded the screenshot of this conversation to a private Slack off Reddit, shared all of that information, all of my personal thoughts with other moderators, just like mining me for information. This like went fucking far beyond what League of Legends were doing. League of Legends were just trying to get me fucking fired, and all the people who worked for me fired, and anybody who had me on a podcast, you know, like trying to get me shunned and isolated. This was like Stasi levels of bullshit. Like, you know, they would have conversations with me, record them, and then upload them to a Slack off Reddit and discuss, what could it all mean? I went, these people are so mentally ill. It's terrifying. Those are your moderators on it. It's a CSGO subreddit, and you're operating like the secret police in East Germany. What the fuck are you doing?
I mean, I totally appreciate. Listen, I totally appreciate. That sounds horrible, but unfortunately, the way you described it, it was funny. Like, and they're just like,
yeah, it sounded awful, but you know, after you,
it was funny. Like,
yeah, it was funny. So anyway, look, let's start the show for real this time. I've finished bitching. It's out of my system. So there was a few bits of lineup news and roster news before we get into the main talking point, which is going to be Dreamhack Malmo, which was the tournament we were all kind of thirsting for, you know, because we haven't had any sort of high-level offline CS for a little bit. So Optic have finalized their lineup, and they've they've definitely made their roster as diverse a roster as I think I've seen, because they've added HS now officially. And I was very intrigued by this pickup. I think HS has been doing well over at Penta before he sort of joined Optic, but I still feel it's like a big step up for him. And like, even though I totally respect his ability as a player and everything, I was very surprised to see him sort of as the name that was selected to go along the likes of friberg, Arlu, Magisk, Mixwell. I thought it was an interesting pickup on that basis. So I wanted to get your thoughts on it and what you think of this, and whether or not this Optic lineup, now that we know it's Final Five, is actually going to have an impact on the international scene.
Yeah, so I actually am of a very similar mind. Like, I actually think this is a massive gamble getting HS as the last player. And I have to say, I feel as though the fact that he's the player they're getting is a byproduct of the fact that buyouts have gotten so ridiculous, and that they did their moves at the end of the roster shuffle. So everyone else that you would potentially get is sort of already signed and has just maybe made a move to another team. I don't think this was even like top 3 choice for them. If I already know it wasn't the number 1 choice, like supposedly they also wanted to try and get Angel from Hellraisers, and he was going to be the in-game leader. But again, apparently it's just impossible to get that guy out of Hellraisers at the moment. So didn't happen. And I have to say, the problem is, like, I don't blame Optic in that regard. Like, I feel like he was kind of one of the few people left. But I have to say, first of all, if you're just trying to pick someone to just be a good player to be in that mix of teams, there's tons of people I'd pick ahead of him. And I have to say, from watching him play, so, okay, when I saw him play at the minor when he was in that Penta team, that seemed like a tournament from the games I'd watched, like, in prep for it, where he like looked like he overperformed at that tournament. Like, he was a lot better than I'd ever seen him be before. And then at the next tournament, which I think might have been ESL Cologne, I think he just went back to normal. I can't remember which tournament they played next. Maybe it was the major qualifier. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But then I remember at the major, he also like had sort of like a spike in form. So the problem with that is either they know what they're doing and they've bought low, and they've got a guy who is going to now, this is him breaking out, and he's now going to be fantastic. Or I feel like they might have just gone for someone who's like not like flavor of the month, I guess, because he's not super popular. He's not like Electronic. Like, Electronic's out of flavor of the month at the moment. But someone where they've seen a little bit of a peak and they've thought, right, we'll gamble on this guy because maybe his buyout isn't huge. Because the implication was from Penta, you either don't have a buyout or they're all so shit you can just get them, which certainly seems to be the case historically. Yeah. So I kind of feel like it's a big gamble, Like, I look at the rest of those players, and I think there should have been an in-game leader in this spot, It should have been someone to bring the rest of it together. Whereas you look at the lineup they have now, the problem with that Optic Gaming lineup is almost everyone in the lineup has either been cut or is in like a slump at the moment. And then this guy's just brand new, basically. So I don't feel as though he's any kind of salve to fix the other issues. And I feel like that looks like a bit of a disjointed team, I'm excited to see it, but at the moment, I don't have any expectations for them.
Yeah, so a few points coming out of that. I mean, first of all, the Angel thing, right? Like, fuck me. What pact has he made with Hellraisers?
Oh, dude, the big joke is, while Moses brought this up to me, but I didn't notice it. When Hellraisers re-signed all the players, so after, when they had that big run at Star Series where they made top 4, the rumor was before that they were actually thinking of maybe dropping those players, but because they made top 4 miraculously, they actually signed all 5 players to through to 2018 or something. And there was a picture, right, that was like, I think this is what I'm thinking of off the top of my head. And Moses linked me. It was either that or a previous roster move where the actual artwork was, the Hellraisers logo was like a devil. It was them signing away their life in like a devil's contract, which is like, do people in Eastern Europe not just get what that iconography means? Like, come on, why are you doing that as an org?
Some mad fucking Faustian pact. But no, I don't understand, because Hellraisers is an organization, like you say, it's been kind of swirling down the pan for a while. You think about where it was in like 2013, 2014. You think about where it is now as a brand. I mean, for me, it's like a toxic asset almost. They haven't spent the requisite levels of money to maintain a decent Counter-Strike team. They're pulling people from fucking nowhere. I mean, seriously, it's funny, that I was going to talk a little bit about just a guy at the end of the show, but the Hazard guy who's been lying to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I almost feel like Hellraisers are operating on that premise. Some of these players, like, hey, do you want to try out for a fucking pro team? Just come along. We'll see if it works. Because I've never heard of some of these guys that they're bringing in guys from fucking the United Arab Emirates or something. Guys, come the fuck on. You know what I mean? If you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is and actually invest in high level talent that's out there, and we know there's people who could have gone in free agency. Optic's roster alone proves that.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to spend in this current climate, you are going to die by the wayside. And Angel is a fucking hot property. People want him. You know, I think maybe a little bit too much, you know. I think people perhaps probably overhype him a little bit because, yes, he's fragging very well at the moment. Yes, he's the best player in that lineup by some distance. Yes, he can be an in-game leader. So I feel that's artificially inflated his value, the fact he's a fragging in-game leader. But loads of teams were going for him, and he cannot be bought. I don't know if Hellraisers are just saying, no, we will not take any money for him. I don't know if there's no buyout in the contract or if the buyout is just so insanely high that no team could ever justify paying it. But I feel sorry for him because the next year of his playing career is going to be fucking hell on earth. I mean, there's no getting away from it.
He's fucked. I mean, put it this way. If you look at the Hellraisers org, you're totally right, by the way. Like, they are not in any position to get anyone who is a prospect or a name. Remember, the lineup they had before, part of it operated on the premise that, like, you know, well, if you're Sticko, who do you know? You know the Zero guy who's from your country? Okay, we'll get him. You know, that's like a sort of, like a back channel to get someone into the team where, you know, you're gambling on young talent. But you notice they haven't signed any big name players. Remember, the last guy they got was the fucking Dead Fox guy who basically was non-existent. He'd never done anything. And what happened was they got lucky or listen, let's give them credit. Maybe they have some great scouting from the players. I don't know. But they made a bunch of really good decisions in a row that made the team like way better than, you know, what they're paying. Way better than the payroll and way better than their opportunities. And obviously, when you kind of, from my perspective, get lucky like that, you do make a bunch of good moves or whatever. You can't do that forever, you know. You can't just go off like intuition or get a great deal every time. Sometimes you're going to sign someone who's just about the level of what you can pay, and hence the current lineup, you know, which is like, I have to be like, okay, I realize people are going to think, well, you said this about Gambit, who obviously did well at the tournament, you know, but this is worse than the Gambit one. This is like a prison for Angel and Zero. Like the others, that team's not going to do anything, mate. I would go ahead and say they'll just never do anything with that lineup ever.
Yeah, and this is the issue here, you know, as well. Like, when you think about players who lock themselves into contract, it's not that bad if you do it when you're 20, 21, 22, 23.
Like electronic.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or, you know, but when you're 27 and suddenly, because of the current climate, you are massively overvalued, massively overinflated. You know, that's the time when, as a player, you've got to make that move because that's where you're going to get your money. You know, that opportunity isn't going to come up again. Let's say, hypothetically, let's say next year there's an abundance of fragging in-game leaders, or let's say the meta shifts, you know, Valve rescind their rule about coaches, and all of a sudden in-game leaders aren't as valuable to a team, you know? All of a sudden, Angel's big payday is dead in the water, you know? So I do feel really fucking sorry for him because I know he could have been on a team like Optic, or, I mean, there was just several teams, Na'Vi even. I mean, that move definitely was going to go
I know
ahead.
the players wanted that one for sure.
So
yeah, he could be he could have been on a team that potentially could win the major. Meanwhile, he's probably never going to make a major again.
Yeah, it's tragic, but it was his signature, Duncan.
Exactly.
And unless, you know, I'm not saying he had a gun to his head. It's not like he's in the ES Force or anything.
Well, maybe he actually did sign a Faustian Pact, and he was like, I want to be the best player in Hellraisers that you've ever seen. And obviously, you know the way it goes with that scenario. He was, but he can now never leave Hellraisers. End of the Twilight Zone episode. Another man in another universe who signed away. You know, like, you know where I was going with that.
Yeah. Just say the scary door and just
exactly. Yeah,
the scary door. So that was Angel and Hellraisers, and just to talk a little bit more about HS, of course. I kind of echo your sentiments. But I think Optic are in a position where, you know, they feel comfortable gambling. Obviously, they have fallen out of a few top-tier tournaments, which gives them this kind of extra time, this grace period, if you like, where they can work on it. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about...
those four dogs actually are pretty comfortable with gambling. Roll back. Yeah, there we go.
Not bad. The other ones. But yeah, so I'm a Pet is their coach. And my understanding is that
brilliant fucking name, by the way. If he's not a submissive in BDSM, I don't know what the fuck messages he's sending out to the world.
He must have a fursona. I'd bet on that. There's someone's going to find a really embarrassing forum post by him.
It's something like a liger. It's something like, even as an animal, my kin is very rare. Anyway, back to that guy.
What the fuck is wrong with you? So yeah, so anyway, my understanding about I'm a Pet is that he's been involved in kind of almost like the coaching, the scouting elements, and he I've heard this on the grapevine. It could be utter bullshit, but he feels HS is a good player that he can work with and kind of develop. So I think he might have been actively involved in this pick as well. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if you've heard anything similar.
Okay. Well, what's interesting about that is this is going to be a massive crucible for him, is this team, because in CLG, the whole thing that his rep comes from is that CLG's lineup looked so bland on paper. Like, the veterans are all the washed up ones we thought, and all the young guys are the guys who didn't make it, who failed. So you're like, right, well, that's a surefire roster that's going to do nothing. And it's not like they had massive placings, but they did massively outplace expectations. And they had these key, like, best of one victories where they snapped like Gambit streak and they beat SK on Mirage. And the thing is, when they did that, all the interview comments said things along the lines of like, oh, we prepped extra and, we actually wanted them to play their best map because we had like counters in place. And listen, some of the credit goes to FNS for that. He's the in-game leader. But apparently within their org, I'm a pet guy, who's the analyst and coach, did a lot of the work. And so that's kind of what his whole rep is based on. Now, he's coming into this team, which obviously, listen, if he'd been on the old Optic like he originally signed for, you could say, right, just apply the same blueprint. But I feel like he's got to show a lot more than just that. Like just prepping something and showing it to friberg probably isn't going to have the same impact as it was in CLG, because a good part about that is, first of all, you had a real in-game leader, so he's going to be on board with what you say. And then secondly, because the team doesn't have high expectations, they're not like top players, they also might listen to what you're saying. Now you're coming in, you're trying to coach people like Magus, who was just basically kicked off a team, presumably for not fitting the culture too well. Alu doesn't talk. And you just got a bunch of players where it's like, that's the part I'm a bit worried about with that guy. Because when I interviewed him, he doesn't seem like a super confident guy. Like, maybe he's confident, quiet way or whatever. But it reminds me of those guys where they try and win you over by hoping that, when they make their point, you'll see how good it is. They're not the sort of guy who commands respect. So he's probably in for a tough time. So good luck to him. But that's going to be rough with a bunch of big names.
And friberg is an in-game leader. We haven't had time to talk about that yet. I mean, how do you feel that's going to work out? I'm actually quietly confident on that. I think friberg's problem in NIP was that, I'm not saying he lost confidence in the way he was being utilized by Exist, but it was like, I think they kind of were making him do things that friberg didn't want to do. I think friberg was kind of like more, he's always been an impulsive and intuitive player and, likes to entry fag. And yes, his skill level has definitely dipped as he's got older and as everyone's kind of caught up. There's no doubt about that. Much as I love the guy, I couldn't stand here and lie to you. But I think as an in-game leader, I think he's actually going to be better than people might give him credit for. He's always been quite a studious guy, always puts in a lot of work. I think he has a very good understanding of like tactical nuance and I think he'll know how to get the best out of these players as well. And I think there'll be that level of respect there, right? From his teammates, obviously played with Arlu before. I think to younger players, you look up to someone like friberg. So I think this can work out, actually. I don't know if you agree with that.
Here's the thing. Initially, I was very skeptical, and the reason for that was because just from talking to him personally, one of the things about friberg is, right, he is a very competitive guy. Like, I know people think he's a fun guy. No, he's actually, put it this way, one of the things I've often criticized people like Forest for and Exist is sometimes when you look at how they react to losses and how they do things next time, you actually get the sense that, like, they're not as competitively driven as some other players. Like Forest especially, I would always just be like, I realize you're mega talented, dude, but like, does it not get to you when you lose to this team here or you underperform or whatever? Like I want kind of the guy to be the killer instinct guy, which not everyone is. And the problem is friberg did have that, which is very good. But he also, I have to say, I always thought he was a bit delusional as a player. Like in the era when Nip wasn't as good anymore, he is the main guy in that team who in his brain always thought that they were as good, like, oh, we should have won that major. And you know what, this team, when they beat us, we just got unlucky or we just didn't do what we practiced. He'd always have kind of like the, what I have to say are just kind of like not very nuanced excuses, Like, listen, there's some truth to the fact that when you lose a game, maybe you could have done things differently, but you've also got to be a bit more realistic and look at the bigger picture and go, oh, actually that team's style counters ours, or they are a better team than us, let's not pretend like Fnatic 2015 is better than us or whatever. And I felt like that's worrying if you're the in-game leader, because I want in-game leaders who are going to be very rational and know your limits and know what, have reasonable expectations so that then you can set the roles of everyone else and what you do in accordance with where you are as a team. But I will say, I am a little bit quietly confident that he could do it, because what I was thinking about was this, is that when I think about the last few years, I also, even though I think his individual level was bad, I also think he also played the game on nightmare mode, basically, where he had no support for what an entry fragger would have, and also was just expected to play that role. No, come hell or high water, there was never going to be any relief. And so I kind of feel like I don't know if he's explicitly going to be the entry fragger still, but if he is, I at least feel like the positive is maybe he knows what he wants from the game and can call around himself a little bit more and open the game up a little bit like that. And so maybe that can bring a rise to his level. And maybe since he's the most veteran member of the team, he can figure out how to use the other people. You have to remember he had Alu obviously in Nip before, so at least he's got some connection. So there are some positives, I think.
So just a quick other news bits, and then we'll get into Malmo. You probably won't have any strong feelings about this, Duncan, because I know that you. Let's be real. You like the top tier teams, and once we start moving into the wilderness of tier 2, tier 3, Duncan's interest isn't quite as sharply attuned, shall we say?
Oh no, listen, mate. I'm such a cunt that when I did like the Gfinity Elite series, where it's like non-existent teams I've never seen before, I came in with like some bullshit motto to tell the people like, no, I'm not going to do any research because it'll be more cool if I like kind of show that these teams are just coming out, and I'm kind of like, wow, interesting. I didn't know this player would play like that. But I'll be honest, I just didn't want to watch those fucking games. And I actually have learned you can't pay me any amount of money to watch really fucking bad teams.
It's fair enough. I'm glad you're honest about it. You know, I mean, like I casted some games recently as well, and it's like once you get into like tier 2 NA, like fuck me, there is a big drop off in the things you see, you know. But anyway, look, I want to talk about Outlaws, the Bulgarian team. Do you know much about them, Duncan? You've been following their antics?
No, the only team I ever knew was that one that used to be, what was it called?
Headshot Bombers.
Oh, it was called like EFrag or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was going way back in time. Yeah. There was EFrag with Dreamer and the boys.
I vaguely remember them. Don't know.
Right. Well, look, it was just a bit of news. Basically, what happened was there was this sort of like, no. There was this.
I've tried to preempt the story by, wait a minute, Eastern European. Where am I going here, Richard? Cheaters?
Well, actually, I guess it is something that's kind of maybe typical to that region. It was Cirque who went to NRG. I'm sure you saw that. NRG played Cirque, and there was a big brouhaha. You know, Outlaws were saying he's still our player. And then it was like, you know, he was saying definitely not. And then his parents came out and said definitely not. And then he got some legal representation, and they were saying my client is not tied to the Bulgarian organization. Well, kind of after that, basically what happened was the whole team is just fucked off. They just left. And people are like kind of speculating as to why this might be. So I thought I'd pick your brain about this because I see a lot of talent kind of in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, right? But the stuff that goes on with these orgs is fucking terrifying. You know, it's like it's so backwards and antiquated. It is like esports in 2005. You know, you've got people like, I almost feel there's like this impetus coming out of these small organizations where they are literally using players like kind of high profile cattle, if you will. They bring them in. As soon as somebody does well, they just want to get a buyout. But of course, their contracts are like copy paste. You know, they haven't had a professional contract lawyer go over them and stuff. And yet they're posing as these like kind of legitimate businesses. So I'll just read you the statement that they put out. And just... You'll love this. It's such a grandiose statement by the Outlaws manager. Following our mission to enrich the esports ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe, we have invested a lot in our esports academy as supporting the CSGO team Outlaws. We are proud of our achievements and the CSGO talents we've supported to improve and find their way in the professional CSGO scene. Now we look for better opportunities for our esports academy and have plans to further develop our esports brand, Outlaws. So nobody knows exactly what's going on with the team here. What I suspect is that Cirque leaving kind of opened the floodgates, that they looked at the contracts and were like, I actually don't think these are binding. And the players are out there because they're not a bad team in that tier bracket, you know. You'll never watch them, sure. You will never see them play. I've watched them in that bracket. They're not that bad, but I think this is kind of indicative of like a bigger problem that's going on right now, where these tier 2 organizations, tier 2 organizations or like teams in those regions just keep getting sucked into this vortex of contract bullshit, and it is stifling the overall international growth of the game.
Okay. Here's the thing. That Cirque guy, if he ever makes a big enough name for himself in CS and gets name value and then falls on hard times, could film an incestuous porn with his own son called Cirque du Soleil, because Soleil is obviously French for sun, and it would be a pun. Obviously, he'd do it in a tanning room. That's all I've got, Richard. I don't know anything about this.
What?
It's a bit of a reach. It's a bit of a reach. Okay.
What do you want me to do with that?
Okay.
What do you want me to do with that, Duncan?
That's what I'll say, okay. It is in general, by the way, something I have always hated about the lower level teams, that like, those are the teams that stress the hardest the idea that like, we're not just teammates here. Like, I found this player, we've got a great relationship. These guys are like my family. And I always felt like there's a dirty element to that where they're just trying to imply that like, if you leave, you're disloyal, and because they've got you when you're a no-name player, of them don't want you to move on to a better team, flip side style. And they really do feel like, they try to stress like the loyalty element, even though I think that's just a bit dirty in terms of like the business, because it's like, listen, mate, you benefited from him being good and probably better than you thought he was when you got him. Now, if he wants to move to a really good team, like, come on, as long as it's legal, have to let him go. The problem is now everything I say, like legal, we're like a family. Now it's all like tying back into that shit I said before, isn't it? It's all just innuendos all over the place.
Yeah, just like trying to ask you a question about the nuance of contracts. And,
I think Cirque's a nonce.
What are you even doing? I'm trying to be all buttoned down and professional here, mate. You're fucking dragging me down to your level. But no, look, I thought that it was just as an aside as well. I like it when the big teams kind of scout, and we'll pretend NRG are a big team at this juncture for this to work. But I like it when they scout and they go out and they find talent and they're willing to take that chance and they're willing to spend money. And on very rare occasions, it works. I'm not saying this guy's going to be like Rop's level of discovery, but you think about the rise he's had as an individual player. Like already people are saying, well, he's the best player on Mouse Sports. This is a guy who 3 months ago professional players were saying, can we just ban this retard from FPL? And I feel that there is talent. There's gold in them Dar Hills, right? If you're willing to go out and find it. It's just that a lot of them are probably chasing that dream, and they're going to get them signed into bullshit contracts. And from an organizational perspective, it's more effort than it's work. More effort than it's worth, to kind of work through that nonsense to kind of just bring these people abroad. Then you've got like visa issues and everything else. Like I just think it's a real shame that shit like that's out there happening. And meanwhile, magnanimously, yes, we've been trying to enrich the scene by pretending people are in the contract.
Why did they speak like a fucking Bond villain?
I don't know, mate. I don't know. It was completely fucking ridiculous. So I felt a little bit sorry for all of those players. I hope they land on their feet, because it sounds like Outlaws were doing something a bit weird, a bit sinister. But whatever. Right. So not what you were talking about at all, because you're just mentally ill. Right. So anyway, next thing, and then that's going to be NAF to Renegades. So, and then we are going to talk a little bit about Renegades. I suppose we can use it as a segue. We'll get into Malmo. So, a lot of people were speculating about who the fifth was going to be. This was a move that was kind of floated out there for a while, that NAF obviously wasn't going to stay at Optic. Look, real talk, NAF was one of the biggest problems within that team disintegrating, attitude-wise. And hopefully he'll forgive me for kind of just laying this out there. It's not like, it's one of those open secrets. Like, we all know it from the events and talking to players and stuff. And I just think, if people deserve to know the truth. And there was a lot of clashes within that team. NAF and Rush, NAF and Stan, they didn't get on back in that lineup. And then, I think NAF got really despondent over certain things that were going on in the team. And there was talk about them bringing in a player. I think it might have been a Liege. I think after that fell through, NAF got really upset and really kind of triggered. And there was just a lot of arguing going on. People just didn't want to fucking deal with it. You know what I mean? And so NAF was kind of instrumental in that Optic team breaking apart. And I think a lot of people in the organization felt like he didn't have the right attitude. Certainly not for an Optic player, So he's a good player. He was always going to get another opportunity. Him coming at the Renegades, it's definitely a step up, because, man, that Jay-Z Walkings kid was terrible. And we'll get into the nonsense that fans were coming out with about him, because this proved to me that when fans say to me, "Oh, you don't know anything about the game. How dare you have an opinion about it?" Fuck me, that Jay-Z Walkins was like a moron magnet. Like everyone who had a fucking redundant, retarded opinion about CS just gravitated to that talking point to tell, no, he's really good at... Right. We'll come back to that. But just NAF moving to Renegades as their 5th player, I think this is a good move for them. I think this is what they needed to do a little bit sooner, instead of trying to find a diamond in the rough. Take one of these proven and established former Tier 1 NA players and slot them into the roster. I think you even had made that point in a video last year, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yes. Yeah, that was always my point with Renegades. I even said both sides. Like, on the one hand, if they could have, I wanted, like, Azza and JKS to go to the NA teams. But I made the point to them. Remember, this is the original reason I told Monty to get the fucking team in the first place, is you could go the other way. You could also, if you want a new player, you don't have to keep looking, who's over in Australia and can they move over and get a... No, you could just get an NA player into the Renegades team. So obviously they did that with Nifty anyway. Then there was obviously that whole period where Kassad was like, my brother plays and he wants to be the in-game leader. I got my, it's my brother's son.
And meet my girlfriend, Yoko.
Exactly, yeah. She's the manager. She translates everything. Translate this motherfucker. Anyway, so obviously that was like a bad period. But I actually do think that in general it's a good move. But my only concern is like the role element. Because here's the thing. Everyone says that in this version of Optic, like the one they had over the last like 5 to 6 months, that NAF was like the support player or whatever. And I realize that's obviously a very vague term that can apply to a lot of senses. And here's the thing, his fragging in the last few months was very good. But unfortunately, I don't really buy the idea that he's like some support player who's just like exceeding his role. Because like, put it this way, in Dota, when they do their terms of who's like which role, etc., it actually goes based on what they call farm priority, who gets the most gold, who gets the most farm. And in that game, you can have people who technically are like a support player. They can be the 4 position, but maybe in your team, that guy actually used to be like a 3 position. And so he plays very greedy and he kind of takes some of the farm more of the other players and they share it a little bit more and he gets more success that way. But that's a very hard style to make work. So I always personally was a little bit skeptical about NAF and I thought that he was like a decent player, but I felt like they only made him support player because I don't think he could be like the main star of the team. And then I feel like they kind of just let him. I think that's one of the flaws of that team was when they lost Stanislaw, they were just a bunch of fraggers trying to just play like a fucking glorified, ESEA rank S-type mix team. And I thought you could see in their results, they just weren't coherent. So I do think it's good that he joins this team. But my question basically is, if they're really going to buy into that shit of like he's the support player, I don't think that's as good a move. If he's going to come in and be one of the main players, then listen, people think this is harsh, but this is the sort of team he should be on. He should be the main player of a team like this. This is a team that does lack sometimes for a little bit of firepower or a star player. So if the star players are going to be like Azza and NAF, cool, now we got something we can do. That's where NAF was before he was on the Optics of the world. He was back in like Denial and teams that were at the slightly lower level than the top. So I feel like that's the right place for him right now. Also, there's an element, like you say, he does have a bad rap behind the scenes as a teammate and as a player in that sense, but he is young as well. I think he's like 19 or something. So sometimes players like that, Megisk is obviously someone who's just joined Optic for similar reasons. Sometimes players like that need to go out, sort of go into the wilderness a little bit, go on a worse team, figure out who the fuck they are in that environment where, people want you to succeed and they put everything into you. And then maybe one day he comes back to a top team, but in a year or two when something's changed, he's found himself.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, you kind of have to like go down a few pegs. He'll realize that he had a very good opportunity in Optic. And plus as well, the Australian guys, they've got really robust personalities. They're not going to take any shit from anybody. Doesn't matter who you are or what your reputation is. And equally, I think as well, they'll probably be a little bit more resilient to somebody who whines in a team as well. So I think it could be a good fit in that sense. I got to say, like, just on this Jay-Z Walkins thing, when he came into the team, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, but look, man, he used to be the AWPer in Fnatic Academy, and he was sick, and now they're asking him to be a support rifler and all this, right?" Well, clearly, first of all, I don't give a fuck what gun you've got in your hand. There has to be a base level that you're capable of achieving. And some of the mistakes he were making wasn't about the gun he had. It was breakdowns in communication, clearly not listening to calls, clearly not following rotates, taking duels he didn't need to take. And equally as well, when people were saying, "Oh, he was a beast in Fnatic Academy," right, okay, let's look at some of the teams Fnatic Academy were playing, shall we? Once again, Duncan wouldn't have heard of any of these guys. These were, like I say, the jump you go to from tier 2 to tier 1 is insane. if you can play in tier 2 and look like a god, you might just be able to hang in tier 1.
I think Fnatic Academy will probably tier 3, mate.
Yeah, you're not far off. I mean, look, I'll people were like pulling out these games where he dropped like 40 kills, and it's like the opposition were absolute garbage. It's like, look, if fucking Pele had turned out right in
come on,
bringing up a current topical footballer.
Think of a footballer, Richard. If Pele,
all right. I'll make it a bit more current.
And Nobby Styles played on it.
And bloody Kevin Keegan. All right. Look, if fucking Cristiano Ronaldo turned out against fucking Barnet, right, and fucking smashed in 12 goals against them, you'd say he was a good player, but in no way could that game be used as a metric to say he's the best player in the world. It's meaningless, right? Because the level is so disparate. Bangs in 12 goals against Barcelona and wins fucking Real Madrid the title. Now we got something to jerk off about. So that was the thing I had. Now, sure, he wasn't getting the AWP in this lineup, but it's not like he didn't have bad games in Fnatic Academy either. I remember one he played against Kingwin in particular, where he was out of sorts and garbage, and Kingwin are on that threshold as well, right? Of high-level tier 2, could be a tier 1, can get the odd tier 1 scalp. So I never, I thought he was being really overdone as a prospect and a talent. And to me, he looked like someone who was like, this is brutal, this entire segment, I get it. But he looked like someone who was just fucking really out of his depth. And in that sense, Renegades for me have dodged a bullet. It is heartbreaking because he was like tweeting fucking, what was he said? Can't wait to play at E-League. I was like, it is sad, but, sometimes it goes down like that. And for me, the guy weren't good enough.
No, the big problem he had was, even though he was like the name or whatever in that Fnatic Academy team, like when I watched them play at the major where they had to like rebrand as Ballistics because they couldn't be Fnatic Academy, they were fucking not that good, to be honest. Like they didn't look like a team with a lot of promise, Actually, the guy who's in Fnatic now, Golden, was one of the players who looked all right, at least in the lineup. He's apparently the in-game leader. But when I watched this guy, I actually had hopes that he was going to be very good at the minor, because I remember when he was in a team a year ago that played at one of those ESEA Global Challenges, and he beat Echo Fox and completely stomped them, and he did mega. He was on a team called Crowns or something from Sweden. Now, here's the context for that. That's not like, oh my God, wait a minute, he smashed in that team that was Sean Guest. No. The reason I know that result happened is when I was doing my article about how shit Echo Fox is, that was the point. They even got wrecked by this guy. So I was hoping, right, we're at the minor, the teams here can't be that good. How is this guy going to do? And he didn't do anything particularly special. And that's obviously in his team, with all his role and none of these excuses people are giving. So I kind of agree. First of all, if he doesn't play the support role, then apparently he was never going to work in Renegades. So no problems there, right, guys? Now he can go and play his role. And yeah, he wasn't that great before anyway. Like, put it this way, there's a big difference between where Epsilon were, where all those Epsilon players got scouted by the bigger teams and recruited. I didn't hear any pro player like, oh, someone's got to have that Jersey Walking Z at some point. Also, by the way, one of the shittest names of all time.
Yeah, I no doubt about that. But it was like, I don't know what it is about sometimes the CS community. I think they get like, they tunnel in so much on romance stories, and sentimentality seems to be a curse in the CSGO scene. Because, it's not just like, Wardell's a recent example.
Yes.
People were literally telling me Wardell is like some dirty secret. He's going to be the next big thing come out of NA. And it's like, he doesn't even look as good as Kusta was when Kusta was that. And Kusta went to Team Liquid, and we were all super hyped and excited. And we all know how that fucking story ends.
Kusta is that fucking girl where in the club she looks hot as shit. And when they turn the lights on at the end, when they want you to go home, and you just see her makeup's all running, her nose is just a little bit too much like a man's. And then you're like, well, I hate myself in the morning if I stick with this? Or should I just go home to emptiness? That was Kusta, right, in Team Liquid. He looked like a banger in Enemy. Then the lights came on. Dreamhack Malmo, ironically. Team Liquid. He was nothing.
Right. So there you have it. Some thoughts about the development of youth that you will not be watching in the VOD, because they will be removed to protect Duncan from himself. I'm fine. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Right. So now we can talk about Malmo. We can segue in about girls.
So Malmo's not a no-go zone for you?
I'll definitely. Yeah, not bad. It's definitely not a no-go zone for me. To a certain extent, beef squashed with Dreamhack. They did let me attend Dreamhack Atlanta with a VIP pass, which is very nice of them. So you've absolutely helped destroy my career and ensure that for the next 10 years of my life, all I ever hear about is how I acted in self-defense against some retard who was trying to beat me up over a tweet he didn't understand, while your security guards watched on and cried because they're Swedish and all the real men in Sweden died on the Viking longboats. But whatever. Not bitter.
Absolutely.
all
water under the bridge.
Yeah, I'll be out there at the christening to their kids. Yeah, no, I won't. Anyway, point is, it's fine. I like Dreamhack, and I thought this was a decent event overall. I thought there was a couple of issues. It had, seems to be the same old story with every event that occurs these days. Couple of issues on day one that they ironed out. One day we'll be able to do that esports day one, I'm sure. But overall, it was a much needed event on the calendar. Like I've been kind of missing, and I wanted to see how these rosters were going to do. There's a lot of excitement about it. But some of the stories that came out of it were kind of the same old. Virtus Pro is the area I want to kind of start talking about. I remember when they had that ridiculous slump online and everybody was like, they're bloody, it's just online CS. They don't care about it. And then obviously Sadakis just went mental. And fucking yep, they're throwing games, and when are we gonna I apologize for my outrageous statements, but whatever, it was all just a joke. But they're really fucking struggling. I mean, this is the worst I've ever seen Virtus Pro. I said that when they had their last slump in 2015 when we talked about it, and I was like, listen, next time they're in a slump, I will not believe it's a slump. But at this point, I do not know what is going on. And the problem you got with Virtus Pro is there's no answers to fix anything, because the reason they've stayed together so long is you can't make roster changes. It's Virtus Pro. There's nobody in the Polish scene that you can bring in as a quick fix, So I got to say, they can't just keep limping along like this until everyone fucking retires, can they?
I mean, here's the thing. They can in as much as they have those contracts and they get paid and all that. But I certainly hope they don't. Like, I agree with you. You notice I've always been a fairly, people know it was during their first big slump was when we made that bet who'd do better Virtus Pro phase, etc. And obviously I picked the VP side of the equation. I have always been generally one of those believers in the idea that, they overcome all the slumps and they figure it out eventually and they switch who's the in-game leader and then someone reinvents their game, as you've seen time and time again. Pasha becomes a rifler and then Snacks becomes an AWP, whatever it is, right? Yeah, generally I thought they could do almost anything. But let's be real. One day the team has to end. One day it won't work anymore. And I have to say, it looks like that's now. Like, that's today. Think about their only recent result in the last few months was they made top 4 at the major. Right? That sounds sick. Wait a minute, top 4 at the major? Oh, well, you're not 4 in the slump must have finished. But then you look who they beat at the major. First of all, they were one of those teams who beat, fucking Vega Squadron, which was, the free win at the major, Then their only win in a series at the major was obviously against North, who literally kicked one of their young talents because of that tournament, as in North were like, Jesus fucking Christ, we lost this, get out the team then. So as in that wasn't like we beat them and we just outperformed the really great team. You beat a team that was in trouble, and then in the semis against Immortals, which should have been for me a free win, that's the final right there, they shit the bed completely. And then there's 2 parts about the recent tournament Malmo that was so scary to me. One is the last 4 to 5 months, basically since the slump began, the main player it hit was Snacks, and he was the best player in the whole team. Probably the best player in CSGO the team's ever had. And he's just been in form where it's not like he's having one tournament good, one tournament bad. They're just all bad now. Yeah. Don't know what happened to this guy. It's inexplicable.
And look, let's be real. They got smashed by Renegades, who were effectively using a stand-in.
Yeah, exactly.
They had the Jay-Z Watkins guy in the team at that point, and it wasn't even a competitive match. It was on cash, and it was 14-1 at halftime.
I've never, when we say a slump before, it's never been anything like this. This is outrageous. No. They just lost to the worst team in the group, who themselves had to kick a player because he was playing terribly and they weren't that good a team. Fucking hell, how much more do you want? And the other one, admittedly, it was only this tournament, but at this tournament, Neil was fucking outrageously bad. And obviously, again, that's another core player in as much as, first of all, you imagine he's always going to be there because he's the face of the team. But then secondly, he's supposed to be the smartest fucking guy in the team, So these are players you can't kick. That's my problem.
I gotta wonder where it comes from though, because like I've never even seen them this despondent. Like even when they were in the slump before, Taz would do an interview and he'd go, "Look, we know this isn't good enough, but we're working hard. We're going to try some new things. We're going to change in-game leader. We know we'll be back. We love our fans." Lots of interviews. Lots of like you kind of big personalities. Whatever it was, right? Like they always had this good fucking media presence and a positive attitude. And even if you didn't believe it, they were telling you what you needed to hear. Now it's just like the look on they play like they've got a face like a smacked ass all the time. They look miserable as fuck. Barely any sort of interchanges, interactions when things are going wrong. We've seen footage of them now actually kind of arguing with each other, which was actually one of the things that happened last time there was a slump, if you remember that. Yes. Which is another worrying thing, that the kind of interpersonal relationships look to be breaking down a little bit when for example the 16-0 against G2, which went on to become FaZe, one of the famous 16-0s in the game's history. So really crazy to me that I can't put my finger on it. I worry because it comes so soon after two things. And this is theory crafting. I have no particular insight about this. But obviously signing those massive contracts, long-term, big money, one of the highest paid teams in the world, which I always think is dangerous because once you set that bar, what's the enticement? I always worry about that.
Oh, there's a few examples, Richard, in sports of people who kind of like, a team like kind of pulled the trigger too early by giving a guy a max contract. And some of them just become busts completely, never turn out to do any of that shit.
Yeah, I mean, fuck, I'm a Newcastle United fan. I've fucking seen that time and time again. Happened, with
50 million.
Yeah, you know what I mean? We'll just fucking, it's happened a bunch of times for us. And, we negotiate contracts at mental times, like with Czech Tiote, now sadly deceased, died of a heart problem when he moved to China. But, he scored a volley, an amazing goal against Arsenal to like get us back. We were like 4-0 down and we drew 4-4 and he scored the equalizing goal. And on like the next day, 5-year contract, the Lord's like, it's just a goal in a game. Come on, Mike Ashley, you fat fucking idiots. Don't like. Anyway, so yeah, I'm all too familiar with it, mate. But and the other thing that I noticed was, and I always wondered about this. I'd love to get some insight into this. Do you remember that thing where the one of the shadowy owners of the S-Force said to Taz, if you do well at this tournament, I will buy you Mercedes.
Dreamhack Vegas.
Yeah, not the entire team.
Yes. Yeah.
Just Taz. And honestly, I don't care how, like, if me and you were doing an event together and so we were getting paid the same, and then everyone said, and if we break the million, Thorin, you will get a Mercedes. Fuck him out. Fuck this. I'm walking out. I want a fucking Mercedes. You know what I mean? And that's just me being real about it. You know what I mean? So, like, I got to wonder about that as a fucking decision. Like, surely you can't just give one player in the team a fucking 200 grand Mercedes. And you were the four that played on it. Well done, guys. I do worry about that,
No, for sure. No, the big problem I have with that team is that it's one of the only examples I can think of in Counter-Strike where when a team has a problem, I haven't seen anyone come up with a potential solution. Like there's not even a player you can recommend or move. Like here's a real problem, Richard. Because they've stuck with that plan for so many years of like, no matter who slumps, we will find a way to make it work. Right? Imagine they did kick someone. So let's say, for example, they won't do this, but let's say they went mental and kicked Snacks, right? And they were like, you're just playing so badly. We don't know if you'll recover. You wanted to be the in-game leader. That didn't work. Let's say they kicked him, right? At this point, if you're Snacks, you could just go, wait a minute. So I had to sit through Pasha being terrible for 5 months. And then he gets to come back. We wait for him to get better. And he's in the team still. But I have a bad period for once in my career and I'm cut. I mean, by the logic that they were using before, that is unfair. That's the problem. They've all had periods in this team where they were either underwhelming or outright bad as individually, but they found a way to work around it, etc. So the problem I have is, I always used to say I'm amazed they made that approach work of just changing roles. It doesn't feel like it should work that long. And I feel like they did get the most out of it. I think they did the best they could. But I just think every team eventually has to break and do something and change. And so I just feel like this has to be the time, surely.
Yeah, I can't think who they're going to get and how they can fix it. But I agree with you. I feel this is beyond the slump now. It's got to the point where even if you invite them to your events, Everyone's like, why would you invite Virtus Pro? It's like, it's a waste. The fans, the neutral fan is starting to say, we'd rather see one of these like up and coming tier 2 teams over Virtus Pro, which is fucking terrible when you think about it. So they definitely need to do something quick.
By the way, that's also a factor you have to think of as well. If they don't change any players and they stay like they are now, right, listen, yes, the massive events like ESL Cologne will invite you because they want fans in the stadium. But it will get, if you keep underperforming, so you have to start qualifying for tournaments, and they're not going to qualify through these online qualifiers. It ain't going to happen.
No chance. Absolutely.
They're living off those qualifiers. I mean, invites, rather.
Fortunately, of course, ES Force are out there trying to buy all of esports, so they'll always get invited to your epicenters and that kind of thing, so there is that, I suppose. But anyway, so the other kind of disappointment, I suppose, although there's a little bit of context around this, is FaZe. I wanted to see this team kind of hit the ground running. It didn't kind of work out that way. I looked at the results that they had. They did obviously get that win over Mouse Sports. They lost to NIP. And then I'm trying to think what the other result was.
They lost to Gambit in the last match.
And then losing a Gambit. So I suppose within the context of what happened, Gambit had a very good tournament. They were a surprise package. NIP, very good tournament. They were a surprise package. They even beat Gambit. Mouse Sports is really the only result, and it was a best of one where you would kind of say, yep, absolutely, FaZe should have had that. So I don't know if they were a little bit unlucky, but for me, with all of the hype and attention around this team, I was kind of looking for them to have not win it, but have a deep run here at Malmo. So you could say, yeah, okay, they're going to get there. They're going to be, a world force. And it didn't work out that way. And in fact, they didn't look particularly any better than they did when they had the old roster,
Yeah, the problem with this team is it's like everyone I know who's an expert was like, okay, the Guardian move. Okay, I can see how that's good. I can see how that's a gamble. Almost everyone I know when they made the Olaf move and cut Kiyashima was like, don't really get this, but I guess maybe if everything goes perfectly, it'll work. And I feel as though FaZe themselves don't have an answer. I feel like they really did just go out there and they used the logic of like, how can we turn down a chance to get player X? We must do it, And I think this event was them just trying shit and trying to figure it out. And if you look at the group they were in a group where every single team, except, NIP hasn't had a recent roster move, but they're fairly new still. Every other team's roster move teams.
They were there for the taken.
Yeah. You couldn't really prep for these teams. You couldn't really know, you're just going to have to play, and it's probably just going to go on form on the day, It's not a lot. I don't think there's a lot of tactical shit going on with these teams. Like Gambit, obviously brand new. Who the fuck knows what they're going to do without Zeus? The Mouse Sports team, they've torn half the team out, Yeah. I feel as though it was a very chaotic environment. And I'm not super down on them after this event. I do feel as though they have to figure shit out. They look like they were just doing whatever in the game, and they're just going to figure out the roles later and who the stars are, as kind of results tell you, I think. I think they're kind of using that experimental logic. And I will say in the Gambit series, bearing in mind Gambit turned out to be pretty good in the tournament, I think actually they were all right there. Like the fragging was pretty good from everyone. I felt as though that wasn't like a terrible series. It's just overall, I agree, they definitely didn't live up to like what you hoped was the ceiling. And I know we're close to that. But I'll give it's one of those rare examples where I think you can give them a bit more breathing room, wait one or two more lines, and then we'll know, I think, either way, if they can do it or if they're just going to be just names who don't do shit.
I think the thing that leapt out to me was kind of like Carrigan kind of was back to how he was at the end of his tenure with the Danish lineups, and that is that he didn't seem to be making that kind of fragging contribution. He didn't seem to even be in the positions. I don't know if he deliberately put himself in a more support role. I was looking at the games, and sure, there was moments where he didn't seem to be playing the positions that he used to, but equally on some of the maps, he was playing positions that he was kind of famous for. So I don't know how much he changed about his own personal game, and I don't know if that's to accommodate Olaf Meister, because obviously you can't say to one of the greats of all time, you're going to have the exact same role as Kiyashima. Yes. You cannot do that. But I did feel that Carrigan's missed a trick here, in the sense that Kiyashima was his fucking muse. Kiyashima was laid out on a fucking couch naked while Carrigan was fucking drawing him. You know what I mean? Like, he brought Kiyashima back from the dead, said, we'll be on this roster. We're even going to let bigger names, bigger talent go, like guys like Jacob, who people were like waiting for him to kind of do something. And we're going to bring you back in. We're going to use you, you know, what you're good at. You're going to be the support player and you're going to make us all shine. And when that was happening, FaZe looked very good indeed. One bad tournament later, Kiyoshima kind of gets thrown under the fucking bus. People don't realize that the bedrock of the team probably was him and that interplay between him and Carrigan. You swap him out for Olaf Meister, Carrigan's kind of like, fuck, I don't have that guy anymore. I don't have, you know, this sounds awful, but Cantona used to call them water carriers. That's what he used to say. He said that famously about Didier Deschamps, a great midfielder who won the European Cup with Juventus. He said, "Oh, he's just a water carrier in the French team." And Cantona meant it in a very derisory way. But Didier Deschamps was like, "Absolutely, I do carry the water. I win the ball, and I give it to the players who can play." And you need a guy like that in Counter-Strike. You need a guy who does the hard yards. And if it's going to be Carrigan, this FaZe team's going to have problems, really.
Yeah, I agree. Like, first of all, when they made the lineup, my immediately concern was like, Carrigan, you have literally built your name on being like a tactical in-game leader. You now have all stars who tend to want to do their own thing. Like, if you win, it's almost like you're going to devalue your own stock, because presumably you're probably going to win by having a fairly loose style. So at that point in time, one day, mate, while I realize they can't totally cut you, someone has to be the in-game leader, there's a degree to which you'll win and everyone will be like, it's kind of like with Pronax. So you know now that Pronax is terrible, a lot of people have rewritten history to like a more extreme version of what I used to say. Like, I used to never shit on him, but I would always be like, you realize he's not really the best in-game leader, but he's just good for this team. And then he's got incredible players who make a lot of it happen. And when he took away the incredible players, yeah, he wasn't that great as an in-game leader. He didn't do shit. Like, he wasn't some Zeus guy who was going to go to another team, reinvent out of nothing and come and do well at tournaments. So I think people went too far the other way and were like, Pronax never did anything. He's just pure shit. But that's what will happen to Carrigan at this point in time. Because if they succeed, everyone will be like, well, obviously, you had Nico, Olaf Meister, what did you do? Tell him, like, good job. You know, it's your turn now, Olaf Meister. Like, people are going to think that. Then you've got to combine what you were saying about the support element. It's not even about like this is one of the areas where I feel like people nitpick in a really stupid way when they talk about there isn't a support role. Like, yeah, there's not literally one role that every support plays. But I always say it like this. There have to be supportive elements in a team at the very least. There have to be people who literally have a philosophy of, I will make this person better. Like, to take the analogy of the water carrier, another way to say it is they facilitate the other people. The other person has the stage on which to be great because the other people do the work to make that stage and prop them up, and then they're grazing. You need both parts. So I feel like in this team, unless someone's going to completely reinvent their game from what they've done in the rest of their career, Carrigan is like the fucking hard support. He's going to have to give up everything and be the bitch and maybe have terrible games in order for the rest to be good. So this is the toughest spot he's been in. Listen, the upside's also crazy, but fucking hell, this is tough. I agree, it's a really bad spot, and he has just been terrible the last few tournaments.
Yeah, so hopefully they can turn around for FaZe's sake. Other kind of disappointment, it was we saw the Cloud9 roster run out, and obviously there's a lot of hype around this Cloud9 roster, as there always is with every Cloud9 roster, but I actually do buy into this hype a little bit. I agree with this hype. I think this is a legitimate move by them. And again, just to refresh the results that they had, they lost to North, who obviously made it to the final in a best of one. They hammered that boot team, or whatever the fuck they were called. And then they got beaten by SK Gaming in a series. SK Gaming considered the best team in the world. And one of those maps was at least competitive. It was a 16-13. So again, there's lots of context around them finishing as low as they did. Overall, though, I watched their games with great interest specifically. And the one thing that kind of stood out to me over the course of the tournament was just that, Tarek seemed to be kind of rejuvenated. I thought he was doing very well. And that was an interesting component to it because he's the in-game leader now. You know, people saying that he's going to take over that role and was very keen to do so. But one of the things that had kind of typified Cloud9's resurgence recently was an individual resurgence from Skadoodle. And outside of the Boots game, that wasn't there. That wasn't there this time around. And I felt that was a big loss. And I don't know if that's going to be a feature of the team moving forward. So what did you make of this new look Cloud9 and their capacity to kind of go and compete at events? Because I think it's coming. I just don't know how long it's going to take.
Like, I do think, despite what Cold Zero said in an interview where he claimed that he thinks the old lineup of Cloud9 was better than this one, I think that's like, I think that's ludicrous, quite frankly. Maybe he's saying that because he remembers vividly that like Pro League final where Cloud9 beat them when they played out their minds, you know. But that was not the Cloud9 I used to see tournament to tournament. You know, I thought they had a lot of problems. So I think this lineup, I agree. I think it's good. I think it can do something. I am still concerned about the lack of like a traditional in-game leader. I think that will be the thing that holds them back from potentially being, you know, like an elite team, like a top 5 team in the world. I do think they can be very good though. In this tournament, I think they had a hard run in as much as obviously they had to play SK in a best of 3 to decide who got out of the group. I think SK is still the best team in the world. So that's you're not going to win that best of 3. So I don't think the results were terrible. My big concern is this, like, with the players they brought in, apparently Tarek is the in-game leader now, which is what he was doing at the end of Optic.
Yeah.
Now, while already he doesn't really have the rep that you'd think of him as a very cerebral player, okay, listen, I'll give him some room and say that he has a few tournaments to show how it's going to play out. Because Optic wasn't looking bad at the end when he was the in-game leader. They made top 8 in Cologne. Yeah. But I will say this, my concern is when someone like him, who arguably at the moment is the best performing player in Cloud9, is the in-game leader, okay, well, that worked before when Stu2K did the same thing. But in this lineup, you have to remember 2 factors. One, Tarek is not only going to have to be the in-game leader, but he's got Skadoodle, who played badly. And we know Skadoodle is a player that the in-game leader has to very actively kind of play a role in deciding how he plays. So I think that's just a tougher time for any in-game leader. I usually would want I'd want like a Sean Gares, a God B type guy to work with that person. You know, I don't feel as though an in-game leader like Tarek maybe has we probably don't have the skill set as a beginning in-game leader. And then the other factor is, if you remember, one of the best parts about Stu2K being the in-game leader is that's the circumstances in which Automatic became this fantastic talent. Well, with Tarek as the in-game leader, I'm worried about that. Like, is he going to know how to use the Automatic the same way and how to set him up? Because that was one thing Stu2K seemed to have a really good read on. Maybe because he knows the guy so well and knows his mind for the game. So those are the 2 factors I worry about. Beyond that, I think the lineup's really good. Like, Tarek's looking really good. I feel as though, like, this is going to re-energize Rush. Stu2K's been good the whole time. Those are my 2 concerns, is the Automatic and the Skadoodle thing. And it's more in terms of, like, how is Tarek going to manage it? Because these are tough assignments, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I'm not going to be too down on Cloud9. You know, first tournament, they're playing fucking teams that are settled and established. Best team in the world. You lose 2-0 to SK. I don't think anybody can sort of blame you for not going a little bit further into a run if you bump up against SK, even though they themselves are probably still a bit disappointed with their performance. But just in terms of some of the issues they're moving forward, you know, look, the only way that Cloud9 team can go and be a tournament winner is if all 5 of those players contribute the minimum that you know they're capable of and don't underachieve. If they do that, I think they can win tournaments in 2017 with that roster. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. The idea of Tarek micromanaging someone is concerning. You don't buy into that peanut brain meme thing, do you? Or do you?
Here's the thing. Like, first of all, it was obviously said as like, you know, tongue in cheek, as like a sort of joke. I have to say, listen, by the way, first of all, I very rarely say this, but I will say this. I actually like Tarek as a person. Like, from every time I've had interactions with him, I think he's a cool guy, actually. I think he also doesn't take things as seriously as some of the other people, which I kind of like, you know. Like, he doesn't take offense if you say he played shit and he played shit. He kind of gets it, right? But I will say, I do kind of think, like, this is why I'm amazed. I'll admit, you don't have to be a genius to be an in-game leader. There's certain styles of play, maybe you just understand. Like, maybe he's one of those guys who intuitively understands something about the game, you know, but can't express it. But I will say, I do think he's a bit of a peanut brain. And from talking to him, I did put it this way, I wasn't going like, fucking hell, you're blowing my mind, mate. I was just going like, all right, what's that? A house? Oh, yeah, is that the sun up there? And then I was like, you're sound you are, mate. Well, see ya.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've talked to him. I think, yeah, there's stuff going on beneath the surface, but when he talks to you, maybe it doesn't appear like that. I think that's the way of saying it. Yeah, that's the best way. But
maybe his way of playing is like expressionistic dance. That's how he communicates to the world. That is his paintbrush.
Yeah, I think it could be.
When he comes she tell his plans, it's like when Charlie from Always Sunny like draws and it's all just like symbols and shit. And like, what the fuck's this? Just
yeah, good reference, game on point. So right, that's kind of the disappointments that we'll touch upon. Let's get into some of the more successful elements of the tournament. People who did better than perhaps I certainly saw it coming. The first place I want to go to is talking about Gambit. Gambit getting 3rd to 4th at this tournament blew my fucking mind. And them looking as good as they did especially blew my mind. This is, I mean, we, on the Rostermania move, we said, well, that's it for Gambit. They're completely fucked now that Zeus is gone. Maybe, I'm willing to go back and revise that statement and say it's perhaps a little bit naive, a little bit stupid, a little bit dismissive of the efforts that Adrian made. But I did have concerns because we brought this up on the fucking first podcast we did, and everybody said, you're wrong, Fitch is going to be the in-game lead. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Adrian. No, it is Adrian. And that's what terrified me, because Adrian didn't perform like this when he was an in-game leader. But he seems to have... Again, he doesn't have the warg into fucking Dozier, so quite so much, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, so they did really well. I mean, they humbled Mouse Sports. Let me see. I got the other result here. They obviously had that narrow series loss to NIP.
Yes.
Which was a really good game. Like one of the better series there, I thought. That. Yeah. And they lost to
FaZe. Oh, they beat FaZe.
No, they beat FaZe, and they played Astralis
and beat them.
Yeah, and then
lost to North.
Lost to North. That was it. So I mean, some incredible scalps there. You beat FaZe, the most expensive team assembled, while you're kind of a patchwork team, and you beat Astralis, who are the number 2 team right now in the world. I mean, this is an insane run for a new roster with a new player who hasn't even proven himself capable of playing at this level. Well, Fitch fucking did at this tournament. And I'll say this as well, like all the foibles and quirks about Gambit didn't hold them back this much. Mo, up and down, you never know quite what you're going to get with him. But Hobbit was a fucking machine. Got to be one of the best pickups of 2017. Even though I know he's playing in 2016, he officially joined in 2017. I think maybe I'm wrong. I think maybe we just talked a load of shit because that was the knee-jerk reactionary thing to say, and Gambit might actually still be there or thereabouts for the rest of 2017. I don't know.
I'm not buying it. Like, here's the thing. I will say they're much better than I thought. Like, when Zeus left the team and then I saw that this Fitch guy was who they recruited, I made a tweet, which a lot of people referenced after this performance beating Astralis, obviously, where I said, like, this looks like a prison for a Dren and Hobbit. Because you think to yourself, like, well, they're fucked now. Like, listen, Mo, that's about the level he should be at. Dozier, probably should retire at this point in time. But okay, the other 2 players, Adren and Hobbit, could do something. They could be in a potential Na'Vi type team and be a fantastic set of players. So I did think to myself, well, they're just fucked. They're trapped at this point in time. Now, what I will say is that, listen, they looked a lot better than I thought. And I think their overall level will be much better than I thought. Like, I think they could be a top 10 team. I think it could be like 9th or 10th team if things go well. Like, the Fitch guy is a revelation. Like, remember, he was an in-game leader in past teams. Individually, he had a fantastic tournament. He really was a standout. And in a way where I don't think it's reasonable for anyone to say they expected this. Like, he barely has experience playing LANs with teams, never at this level. So I don't think you could expect this. But also, that as a result, I have to kind of put an asterisk and say, will he be able to do this again? That's why I don't know, I mean, it's a brand new team. They've got the honeymoon effect. Will the other teams... Remember, the other teams basically have no experience playing him. Well, you play him again, you have a sense for his skills, his tendencies, your scouting report, and you see with many players, that's what happens. They have a breakout event or 2 events, and then I think it happened to Megas, quite frankly. People learn how to play against them, their style isn't effective, they go down in form, and then you've got the tough question of, like, if you're a great player, you figure it out at that point. If you're not, you can be like a one-dimensional player and you have an okay career. So the Fitch one's my big concern. Like, him being the best player of the team is what worries me, because the difference is Adren, Hobbit, I know they can be fantastic tournament in and turn it out, but him being the best player, that's why I don't really buy that that's going to continue at this level. Then you got to add in that part of what allowed him to play so well is Adren became the in-game leader, and that hit Adren's numbers big. Like, Adren wasn't the star player I've been watching all year long. Like, dude, until he became the in-game leader now, I had Adren as like one of my candidates for player of the year. I'd have him like top 5 player.
I think he's still there. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Not least because he was in a worse team, than all the other fucking Nikos and the Cold Zeros. He was playing with a worse team, and he was a fucking banger. He was really good. Well, his numbers looked a lot worse. So what you got to think of there is, if being an in-game leader makes Adren less effective, now it puts even more of an onus and more of a burden on that Fitch guy to be really good. Then you add in, listen, fair play to Mo. He kind of replicated what he did at the Major. He was pretty good. But again, like I've made my points clear on him. I just feel as though like he's in a spike of form at the moment, and I've watched him for too long to think it's going to stay. I feel like he's going to come back down to earth next event, the event after. Yeah, sure. He even tends to have the odd map where he just shits the bed completely. I think he's all right. He's not a bad player, but for me, he's someone who should be like a star of the very bottom end of tier 1 or the top end of tier 2. At that level, he is like a world edit to me. That's the contrast I always give, because they're not bad. You know they can do well in some games, but you know if you put them against the Kenny S's of the world, you know who you're predicting to win, and it's the Kenny S side of the equation. So I would say some of the factors here just seemed like too good to be true. Like Fitch just way too good. They won on a lot of different maps as well. Like I find it hard to believe they just have this massive map pool that no one can figure out. So I don't buy those continuing. With that said, listen, you can't fuck around. They beat Australis in a best of 3. Fair play. That is extremely impressive.
I mean, beat them. Fucking beat them.
Well, the first map, which was the Gambit's pick, the cash one, that was very close. But listen, smashing them on Mirage was insane, especially because, here's another fact that's going to sound, people are going to think I'm being like backhanded in my compliment here. But the way they beat Australis on Mirage, I just don't buy anyone could ever do that again, because they had this this very passive style of CT defense where they just gave up all of mid, didn't spot it at all, and literally kind of just let you come onto even the A site. I don't buy that anyone can make that work. Like historically, the map has never worked that way. I feel as though bizarrely it worked against Australis, almost because Australis kept expecting them not to keep doing it. And so Australis would waste all this utility fighting for mid control when it turned out you actually could have just walked up without throwing anything. So that's like a very counterintuitive style that I feel like that might be like a one and done style. I don't think you can keep doing that. Listen, if they can, then maybe they've just innovated a new style. I don't know, and it's going to work. Sadly, they didn't play Mirage against North, so I never got to see it again. We only got to see it that one time, so I'd have to see it again to really know. But no, listen, to beat Australis on North like that, to destroy them, that's fucking insanely impressive.
Yeah. So the other team that kind of came a little bit out of left field and had a performance I wasn't expecting was, of course, NIP. I feel like the history of this show, much like the history of the majors, is we're always kind of talking about NIP. It's usually when we get our best bits. You had a tweet about Exist. Same old, same old. You said if we did a tournament in Amsterdam and Exist took some magic mushrooms, perhaps he'd do a normal pick ban, which is an astute observation, because it's still the one fucking area with NIP that tilts me off the fucking face of the earth. Like, picking maps that your opponent is strong on, picking it sometimes into their best picks. And yet this NIP team, despite that handicap, which they've had for seemingly years, they here at Malmo got big results. And not only did they get big results, they did it with, Forrest having his moments again, Get Right having his moments again, but in particular, Draken and Rez really coming up and starting to look like polished players that can wear the NIP jersey and become part of that dynastic team. So again, I watched all of NIP's games with great interest. There were some good ones there. What really stood out for you about this kind of, rejuvenated NIP, if you like?
So the thing about NIP is that the additions they've made look like those moves worked. Like Draken especially has looked pretty good in the team. He does seem like he's very weird in as much as, like, when you watch him play, it's almost like he only hits the impressive shots. He reminds me a little bit of Scream in back in the day, like 2014 style, where he was like the problem child of some of the French teams, where it's like, because the kills they get are so nuts, your brain tells you this guy should be amazing. And then sometimes they don't do the simple kills, and you're just like, what the fuck is this? So he's a bit confusing in that sense, but I do think he's being a good addition. Obviously, I want them to have a real AWPer and not keep making Forrest kind of do it every now and then, because I think Forrest is just way too good at the rifle. I think it has rejuvenated the old players, like Forrest and Get Right look a lot better. They look back to their old ways to some degree. So there's a lot of positives. The negatives are that, first of all, they could certainly have gone out against, they could have lost to Gambit. That was a very losable series. Gambit was in position to win that. They absolutely almost lost to Navi on Nuke. They had faced championship point a bunch of times, at match point rather. And then the series against G2 just wasn't that convincing from NIP. So I have to say the downside is I think the roster's good, maybe needs a bit more time. They don't look like they have a very deep map pool. Like, basically, as far as I can tell, like, if you remember at ESL Cologne, they just only won cash in like the Swiss system. Then they went into the playoffs, only won cash and lost to Cloud9. So they have cash, they have Nuke, and then from beyond that, I don't know how many more maps they have. They have maybe train a little bit because people don't like it. They don't feel like they have a wide map pool. So I think the big issue for me with them is I don't know how high the ceiling is. Like, I'm not confident saying this is a team that will win tournaments. I think for them, it's probably good if they could be like the 6th or 7th best team. I think that's probably reasonable, which, by the way, is way better than what they recently had. So listen,
Absolutely.
take it if you can get it, and then hope that a Rez or someone improves further and gets experience. But listen, it's good. I like it. It was enjoyable to watch, but they didn't feel like they were that deep.
Yeah, I understand it. The maps often is the problem with NIP. I got to say, though, the thing that did impress me most of all was in that Na'Vi match, because we've talked about Nip Magic. Famously we made that a meme. Yeah. Oh, mate, I mean, seriously, to battle back on Nuke with these players who don't have that level of experience that Forest Exist and Get Right do, and somehow to be able to replicate it, to find the guts, that is one of the kind of gutsiest performances, I think I've seen in 2017. To be on the ropes like that and somehow get to overtime, make it work in overtime, get through, and then win the series overall. I know Na'Vi in particular felt like they had the stuffing kicked out of them a little bit after that one. You saw Simple talking about my individual level of skill, even though I think he was like hands down. Yeah, he was like hands down the best fucking player in that series. So yeah, it was just amazing stuff from NIP, and not something I expected to see with younger, more inexperienced players. So for me, that's the encouraging point.
Here's the thing. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go on. Yeah, jump in, dude.
So I will say, first of all, remember, you always have to take tournaments like as a whole. You can't just look at one map. So listen, in the G2 series when they played on Cash, yes, that Rez guy shit the bed massively at B and was a massive liability. Although I will say they didn't really help him. But even so, he fucked it up, right? And he probably did play a massive role in why they lost that map. But you go back in time. He's one of the heroes of them getting past Na'Vi. He actually had a very good performance, so you got to give him credit for that. But they'd be out of the tournament already if he'd have played badly in that series. He played well there. You got to give him credit for that. Secondly, on the Simple angle, like you're saying there, that is one of those things where it's like you're only allowed to say something. Listen, he's actually trying to be genuine, by the way, when he says that. Like, what he's trying to do is take personal responsibility and be maybe I could play even better and win the game. It's not your fault, anyone who did badly. The problem is you can only say something that to everyone else looks actually like a little bit arrogant, like, I'm so bloody good at this game. I should probably drop fucking 100, shouldn't I? You can only say that if you're as good as like a Nico or Simple or whatever. Because think about it, it's like if when there's some pretty girl who's like, oh, I'm getting so tubby now. I love to have a donut every 2 weeks. And then there's obviously some like friend she has who's a bit chubby who's like, yeah. Oh no, I just needed to finish this ice cream before it goes off. I bloody love the chocolate. They don't feel good when he say that. What the fuck's everyone else in the team think when he says that?
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it is. But I mean, look, I've just brought the numbers up while you were talking there about it. Okay. So in that series against NIP, Simple had 81 kills across 3 maps, including the overtimes. But the nearest person to him is Forest with 70. So that's the kind of level he's operating at, and I understand. I think the quote was something like, he can improve his personal level, and he's not dropping the 30s anymore or something like that. So I think it definitely can't all. I definitely don't think it should be all about him in Na'Vi. For me right now, player who's got to fucking check himself before he wrecks himself because fucking Seized is back is Flamey. It's Flamey. Yeah. So that's I'd like to see Flamey do an interview where he comes out and says, actually, Seized took all of the pressure because yes, I mean we all know Seized was playing terribly, but Flamey was. You go back to 2015, the end of 2015, early 2016, Flamey was like a fucking world beater. He was having these incredible games. I haven't seen Flamey have one of those games for a long, long time now. And again, there's always going to be this cyclical element to it. Now that Zeus is back in the team, you expect him to be bottom of the frag charts all of the time. Yes. That shouldn't make a difference because Seized, for whatever reason, he's obviously a genuine peanut brain. You know what I mean? Like, he obviously can't cope with being an in-game leader and fucking playing. Look, at the end of the day, he's a good player. He's got, like, the best skin of any CS player I've ever seen. Exactly, like, he's startlingly good looking. Yeah, you'd want him for a cellmate or whatever. So you got Zeus, you got Seized. If Flamey starts performing worse than fucking Zeus in this team, well, fuck it. I mean, like, Flamey is the player on the chopping block, isn't he? Because he is meant to be up there with Simple.
Yes.
So
no, that was what was scary about this tournament, is that if you look at the lineup they have now, it's fairly obvious actually. They have the opposite problem to FaZe, where it's like it's beyond obvious who the stars and the other elements have to be in this team. So you look at the team, obviously Simple has to be the star player, but it's supposed to be Flamey as the other star player with him, clearly, because who's left? Seized has had bad time and obviously excelled when he was a support type player. Edward's just kind of a middle of the pack guy who's just a veteran and brings experience and actually had a pretty insane tournament this time around. And then Zeus is known to not exactly be a massive fragging in-game leader and just the brains of the experiment. So you got to have Flamey if you're going to win these tournaments, because like to touch on what you just said about the numbers is Simple. Those were like numbers where he can do exactly what he did now, and he's walking away with the MVP of the tournament if the team comes along and does the rest of what they can do. Like he's playing absolutely amazing CS at the moment. It's not his fault at all. And I'll go ahead and say, yeah, I think Flamey's the obvious liability at the moment, because that's one thing I worried about when they made this move. Is that if you remember when Flamey first joined Na'Vi was when Zeus used to be the in-game leader, and Flamey didn't really become like a consistent star until Starix took over doing like the coach in-game leader role. And so the storyline, at least we've pushed it a lot, admittedly, is that, Starix was like, knew how Flamey needed to play and was like micro him a little bit. So maybe there's something to that. Again, since it's a new lineup, first event, I'll say Zeus is a smart guy. I'm sure he's going to think about this and figure out if he has to readjust.
Already said that in an interview.
Absolutely, yeah. So listen, it definitely can be improved, but that's an obvious thing that has to change. Like you can't be having like Edward be the second best player in the team. It's got to be Flamey. And then, by the way, if you do get those two on fire, Na'Vi can do a fucking lot. I still feel like this Na'Vi team's pretty good.
And I know you described him as a flavor of the month. Still worth noting that Na'Vi, yeah, they've brought Zeus back. They've still got money to spend. They can still make that electronic deal happen. And right now, as things stand, I'm a believer in electronic. I'm kind of on the Anders bus with that one. I think he's the real fucking deal. I don't think it's like a spike of form. I think he is a fucking potential god. He's going to be like one of the players of 2018 for fucking sure. And if he I'm sure, all due respect to Flipside, Stuart Electronic has now got one eye and thinking, well, I belong in a team like Na'Vi, and every day Flamey is underperforming. All they're doing is they're just encouraging the owners of Na'Vi. You know what? Maybe that buyout isn't so much. Maybe we do go and maybe we do drop six figures on Electronic to get them out of Flipside. And I think if they do that, holy fucking shit, that all of a sudden Na'Vi look like a team to me that should dominate. I've been saying that for so long. I sound like a bit of a Na'Vi fanboy. They had a period of time where they should have been the best team in the world, and they fucked it up because of interpersonal bullshit and just general stupidity. I think if they bring Electronic into that roster now for Flamey, for me, that is a team that goes on and dominates, if it happens. So fingers crossed on that. Right, the last 2 points, and then we'll take our donators' questions. So quickly, let's talk about North. Obviously, North made it to the fucking final. Out of fucking nowhere. I didn't see it coming. Obviously, on Rostermania, we said these guys are the most fucking...
underwhelming,
yeah, underwhelming star team out there, and on all evidence, I think we're absolutely right to say that they came out swinging at this event, though, and obviously got Valde in the team. Had some fucking really good performances, Valde, most notably against Gambit, where he was fucking brilliant, instrumental in North beating Gambit. I've got to say, actually, I thought AZ. Anders said in the final, when AZ was kind of shitting the bed a little bit in the final, Anders went, I've got to say, if you had to ask me, I would say AZ had a very good tournament. And I'd be like, Anders, mate, I don't know what you're watching, but this doesn't look like the fucking AZ that was a six-figure fucking buyout back in the Dignitas days or whatever. AZ has been dead weight, and I thought he was kind of still sort of dead weight. You got Valde going off, you got Config going off, Cajun's doing Cajun. There were a couple of series where MSL considerably performed better than AZ, which is a terrifying prospect if you're a North fan, and yet they still made it all the way to the final. So I guess the question is this, like, have they finally found the blend, the chemistry, or is this like a one-off aberration? Should they still get rid of AZ? What are the talking points coming out of this final appearance from North?
Like, the amazing thing is, it did look as though they were like a new team. Like, even though a lot of the factors, like, listen, in terms of Config and Cajun, yeah, I agree. I actually think they just played the way they normally do. Like, I think Config at the moment is absolutely one of the best players in the world. That guy has somehow emerged to be fucking really good all the time. And then Cajun is just a rock of consistency. You know what you're going to get from him, He's not going to be the best player, but he's also not going to be the worst. He's going to kind of deliver a good performance. The big question marks were the others. Like Valde had a really nice first tournament, especially stylistically. He looked like a really solid pick for the team. Like in all the kind of clutch round situations, he looked like he made the right moves, you know, like he seemed very calm under pressure considering what a new player is to the scene. Remember, he's only been at the top level scene for like a year, like just over a year. He really slotted in nicely there, looked like he fit the style of the team. The big concerns I had was, like, first of all, I agree, AZ is still not good. Like, he's still got massive problems. The problem is, in the series they played against Immortals, for some bizarre reason, he went crazy in that one. Now, I think Immortals, I think they're shit, quite frankly, but I think that played into it. I think that helped. But also,
this happens because we are from Brazil?
Apparently, yeah. Well, listen, I didn't make you be born there. So, I will say this, okay? I do feel like in that one series, he just looked like a different player. Like in that one, he was like winning clutches and he was making all these smart moves. And his fragging was insane. That just didn't happen even in the rest of the tournament, mate. He went back to being normal again. That was just some weird flash in the pan. And then I agree, by the way, MSL. I always used to say this, right? MSL is one of those guys who it's never enough, right? Like you could sit him down and go, you know what, mate? You're one of the smartest in-game leaders we've ever had. The way you bring out young talents and develop them is incredible. So few people could do that. The ability that you have to work with lesser players and not always have to have the best players to accomplish things. You always find a way to have a deep map pool and to get specialist on maps. At the end, he'd go, yes, and I'm also a really good player. And you go, well, listen, don't be silly, you know. I mean, those are all good things, you know, but you're a pretty bad player. No, I'm also a really good player. You just don't understand why. It's like brilliant sound. Mate, I've watched you play MSL your whole career. You are a shit player. You have a really good brain, though, and luckily the game isn't all about fragging people. But he is a fucking appalling player, like, individually. So that doesn't have anything to do with North's performance, because he's got so many good players, it shouldn't be on him anyway. But I think as long as AZ underperforms, it kind of puts more of the spotlight on MSL when he has his issues, you know, because you can't have two players who are low fragging like they are. So I think, listen, Valde move seems great. Config is amazing right now, so ride that hot streak out. The other aspect I'd say that is a massive positive is this team already had one of the deepest map pools. They basically used to play 5 maps, and they could play the 5 maps almost equally well, and they could always contest against even the best teams on those maps. So the bizarre thing is, I understood really in a way why they always kind of gave themselves a get out of jail free card and were like, well, no, the roster's not bad, because they would always have these like close losses to the best teams. They'd be like, no, we can compete. But this tournament, they had all these mad games on Train where they were winning. Like, they beat fucking Gambit on it. They beat SK Gaming on it, who's obviously a pretty good team. And so Train was a map where that used to be like automatic ban for them. That was their perma ban, if not second ban. They never wanted to play it. So if they've really, maybe it's something to do with Valde added to the team. I don't know what they've changed, but there are some positives for North. And while, yes, making final of this tournament is probably honeymoon period, you know, again, a lot of the results at this tournament I think are upside down because it's the first tournament after not only the major but a huge roster shuffle. So you add both together, I think it makes sense that there's going to be some wonky results. With that said, I think this North team can be better than the one they had before. I do think it can be solid. I think it can become like maybe a top 5 team if they do well. I think the potential's there. It looked good in the first outing, you know, a lot of positives you can take away.
Yeah, and you know, I'm always a little bit cynical about teams that have like the one hard permaban map and it's just there and it's been there for years. Like MSL, it's always going to be cash. Any team he's in, he's banning cash. You know that. You know that going into a veto, you've got that luxury. There's never going to be any curveballs. It was like when Virtus Pro had Dust 2 was their fucking permaban for like 3 years or whatever the fuck it was. It's like you always know that's going to happen. So you can tailor your veto around that knowledge. You know, there's never any surprises. So I don't know. I like MSL, but it's like I said, for me, he's an in-game leader with a lot of quirks and you know, yeah, he doesn't.
And a massive forehead.
Which sometimes is a precursor for great intelligence.
Yeah, you know that. Yeah, exactly. So
it's not. It's fine.
What's wrong with it? Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, nothing wrong with having a 5 head. It's actually a compliment.
Fair enough.
So anyway, it was a great day for you, Duncan. The final, because obviously we all know you like the French. You're a big fan of obviously Shocks and Kenny S. You've been talking about how you want these guys to get in a fucking team forever and see what they can do. Well, it has been poor up until now. And all of a sudden, they came out. Their fucking results here were great, but their performances were great. You had Shocks, you know, going gangbusters, Kenny S. Everything you would want out of the team was happening. I think, you know, I was looking up because I wanted to tweet something out like, in a distant future, when we look back at Counter-Strike history, I think MBK will go down as one of the greats of all time. I mean, I genuinely believe that. And I went to look at like his Wikipedia page. The motherfucker's only 23. Like it's so retarded how fucking good he is and how much he's achieved. But I think most notably as well, the development of Body continues. Apex was looking like Apex. Everything went right for G2 at this tournament, and they definitely deserved to win. Were comfortable in the final. I saw an interview with Kenny. I think it was Kenny S, who said we won Cobblestone because of Smiths. And that he'd done some tactical thing as their coach. Now, I know you were kind of skeptical about Smiths as a coach. You thought he was just there to kind of act as like a body pillow for shocks more than anything. But what did you make of G2? Is this super team finally going to click?
I mean, my joke would have been like that. Like, we won because of Smiths, because he's not in the lineup anymore in square brackets. That would obviously be the ha. Yeah, fuck Smiths even more, even though he's not in the team. But anyway, what I will say is like, this is actually so okay. It's not literally the team I thought they'd be when they formed, because I have to say, even though Shox had some really good games, like against Nippy was amazing, he's still not like the superstar player of the team. He has like great clutch rounds and all that stuff. But again, it seems clear because he's the in-game leader. Like Adren become the in-game leader, they sacrifice something of their game. That's clearly the case for some reason. So it's not the Kenny S Shox, like show that I thought it would be when they made the team, and that's why it would be the dream, the best rifler and the best AWPer, and they'll dominate the world. Yeah, it's not that. But this G2 looked way better than the one that's been on the last few months. And the key element that I think was like I'd hoped the team would be is, remember, one of my key elements, and people are going to think I'm memeing him, but I'm not, as to why I thought G2 would be amazing, is they don't have Happy in the team. And I got really sick, beyond the baiting, I really fucking hated the way Happy just force-bought the team 24/7 and just ruined a load of games. And so I thought to myself, great, in G2, they're going to like learn from that, and they're going to play, like, think about it logically. Our best player is the AWPer, who might be one of the best players in the world. Let's force buy all the time so he doesn't have any AWPs. That really was what they did, Rich, for like months and months.
No, I know. It was
mental. So, well, here's the thing that's so sick about this. At this tournament, they didn't do that. In fact, at this tournament, they barely ever force bought. They did pure ecos, and ecos where they bought a CZ and nothing. It was amazing. I've never seen them do this before. And you know what? It was fucking working. First of all, they're so skilled, they would get kills with the CZs and nothing. Then they would, because they weren't force buying, they would get full gun rounds again, like a round, 2 rounds later, and they would win the gun rounds, and they would win games that were like the close games, thanks to economical management, being a proper team. And here's the sickest thing. They win this whole tournament because of this. And Smiths does an interview afterwards, or a tweet or something, where he says something along the lines of like, we just did that because we lost all those pistol rounds against SK. We'll be bringing back the force buy. It's like, fucking hell. Why even say that in public? If it's going to work, don't tell me that.
Well, look, I mean, there were problems with the team.
What is that?
I want, look, so the G2 SK series is probably where I'll focus my attentions. Okay. I think it's a microcosm of everything that was fucking good and bad about G2. And I suppose the encouraging thing is that they won that series. For me, they won the tournament at that point, I think. I think that was that was the defining moment. They won it predicated on a series where they didn't win a single fucking pistol round. Yes. That is insane. That is, you go 0 for 6 in pistol rounds in a best of 3, and you still win against the best team in the fucking world. That says immediately, you don't have to understand CS on a deep level to know that, fuck it, when they had the guns, they were wrecking people. They were wrecking the best team in the world. And they rarely, like you say, they had to do full ecos. They had to start exploring the economy. They had to be smart with their money. If they just consistently force bought in that, they're not in the, they don't go through to the final or whatever. But I'll say this, definitely a moment on Inferno. I tweeted about it and made a joke about it, saying G2 should spend some of the winnings on buying SK Gaming some drinks. That inexplicable push on series point down banana. Like, Henry G got tilted off the face of the earth about it. I know Moses got fucking tilted off the face of the earth about it. Like, just anybody who understands CS, it was like such a bad decision in that moment. G2 get that momentum, they start coming back, they win the overtime, win the series, and go through. I don't know why that happened. It was really weird. Like, I think Fur came out and took personal responsibility for that call and said it was on me. I did that and I shouldn't have done it. Yeah. And that's so strange and so bizarre for an SK Gaming team where a tactical facet a call is made and it's not coming from Fallen. So it makes me wonder about why maybe SK Gaming haven't quite been living up to their billing in the last 2 tournament outings. So G2 did get handed a little bit of a gift there, but overall, you're beating the best teams in the world with 0 pistol rounds. Your map pool looks fucking deep. I don't know why people are picking Cobblestone into G2 right now. I think that's a mistake. I think you got to. I think they're a sleeper on that particular map. I think even though they were banning Train against some of the better teams on Train, I think they can compete on Train. I think they're obviously very good on Inferno. They feel to me like a team that, with just a few tweaks and a little bit of attention to detail, they can have a super deep map pool and be very competitive. And honestly, I've been scratching my head as to why they haven't been doing better in tournaments up until this point. So I don't know if this is the catalyst, if this is going to be a resurgence for them, but they're definitely a consideration for me now as being potentially that team that can maybe go on a run of tournament wins and chip away at that number 1 spot, because we're in an interesting place. I don't think we have a hard number 1 team. If you think about SK Gaming being the number 1 team in the world and they're only getting to quarterfinals and shit, and throwing away games that they should have wrapped up, Astralis definitely not number 1 for me.
I haven't won a tournament since March. Enough said, right?
So there is space now for a team to get their shit together and fucking dominate. But it's just about who it's going to be first. So just some final thoughts about G2, and then I'll ping you up this question. So do you think they can do it? Do you think that this is now the torch paper been lit, or is this like the classic, it's actually a slightly lesser tournament, you get these upsets, How do you contextualize this?
So, first of all, like I said, the big concern is I was thinking to myself, they've gone away, they've thought about their problems with the force buy, they've literally now become one of the most sound economical teams, and this is going to be the new G2, because I think that would work. It looked fucking fantastic in all the games I saw it in. Whether he was memeing or not, if that's true that they're not going to do that and they're going to go back to the old force buy stuff, I think that will cripple them. Secondly, as you're saying about the Inferno game, where basically SK could have just won the series, the really worrying thing about that one was, first of all, Apex in that whole series was like a fucking god. He just went absolutely mental, listen, it's not like he never does that. He definitely does it every few months, but obviously he doesn't do it every tournament. He's a fucking entry fragger. So first of all, in the tournament, he looked so insane that that's not going to be every tournament. You can't expect that. So just no one can do that. The idea an entry fragger can frag like that is that's your best case scenario. It doesn't happen that often because it's just too tough a role. And then secondly, on that Inferno map, mate, all these teams, right? So at ECS, there were these 2 Inferno games that SK won. They won against the Astralis and FaZe, and both were these really close games. Astralis and FaZe are looking at this game here going, where the fuck was this Cold Zero Infer when we were playing them? Those guys are wrecking us every time. And in this game, Cold Zero was the worst player in the whole fucking server. Not just in terms of score, he just didn't do any of the shit he does. And he's normally supposed to be the rock, that you build your wins off. So I feel like that's a one-off. With that said, for the rest of the tournament, yeah, I agree. They look a lot better. Map pool looks a lot better. Now they're playing Mirage. That used to be their permaban. They've also changed it up. North as were Train, so they're now playing a map they didn't play before. I also think, they could play Train, but they've just decided at the moment to make that the banning, I feel like the map pool's better. The key for me is, I already know Kenny S can play at this level. He's been at this level the last few months. Apex can do this every now and then. I just hope that, as well as the new map pool, keep a bit of this style. Try it again, because I feel like this is what would allow you to be the team because of how much talent you have. This is how you could be the top team. I do really think people will think this is bias. I think this team could be a consistent top 2 to top 3 team in the world. Every tournament, they could do what SK and Astralis do, where normally, they're a lock for the semis. Yeah, you can beat them maybe if you play better, but the talent level and the potential roles they can put them in, I think this should be an amazing thing. I think they were underwhelming in some of those past tournaments, and had obvious flaws.
Yeah, well, I hope they can do it. I'd like to see the guys back on top. But like I said, I want to see who the next number 1 team is going to. For me, we don't really have one. It's like Game of Thrones at the moment. We don't have a recognized monarch, Definitely, that's where I was going with that joke. You've already had some edgy ones today. Let's keep it real. Right, so Mateus Piazza.
What about that time Shocks and Smiths were on a boat?
It's good. Now bend the knee. All right, so anyway, Mateus Piatakowski says, yes, why don't you come to the city of the machete? No, he doesn't say that. He says, of SK, G2, Na'Vi, Astralis, and FaZe, which team do you feel is going to be the most successful and which is going to be the least successful come the end of the year?
Oh, I see you put the chat in the question in the chat, because I need to fucking read that list again. It was 5.
Yeah, SK, G2, Na'Vi, Astralis, and FaZe. So basically, who's going to be at the top of that and who's going to be at the bottom?
Okay. Right. Assuming, obviously, we mean from now on, and we're not including the wins they already have, because it's already fucking hard to overtake SK. Obviously, Astralis has those early wins to their note. The teams they have right now... See, I still have a lot of faith in SK to turn it around. I think that team's so fucking solid. I think they can absolutely do it. Mm-hmm. I do like G2. Like, I think if G2 did that more economical style, I think they'd be extremely good. I am a bit worried about Astralis because it does feel like they're still very good, but they don't win tournaments. So that's a concern right there. So I guess it's hard to be the best team if you never win any tournaments. Of the other ones, like Navi's good, but you've got to figure something out. I have no clue about FaZe. FaZe could be the worst of the lot. FaZe could be very good. If I have to pick right now, I think the easy answer is to say SK. I think the more riskier ones to say G2.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And who do you think is going to be the least?
I mean, at the moment of those teams, I think it's between Na'Vi and FaZe. So I guess I'll gamble at the moment and say FaZe because I feel like they've got a lot to figure out, whereas the rest of them are like, one or two things from tweaking. Whereas at the moment, I don't even think FaZe knows how it's going to work. I think it's just they're just figuring shit out. I'll
tilt you off the face of the earth here, mate, because for me, I'm just starting to wonder if we're going to see the Astralis slump.
Okay.
I've been around the block a few times with Danish teams. I get wind of stuff, and I don't know. I got to say, I think if it was out there, I think FaZe has spent too much money to fail. So I think they have to succeed, or you may as well just, do you know what I mean? I know that's retarded. Like, okay. Hear me out. Okay. I saw your face.
Okay.
So, like, I think when you spend that much money, it's like, this is it now. This is the final form of FaZe, right? This is what they've been building.
This is the Anders theory, right? If I've spent this much money in the club, there's no way I can strike out. One of them's got to sleep with me, right? Shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Anders. But look, no, this is what I think. I think this is now the final form. So now what you start doing is peripherally, you start supporting the team. It's not about roster moves anymore. It's, you've got your fucking all-star lineup. Carrigan is definitely going to have to be the pack mule in this team. I think it's going to suck for him to do it. But we know he's tactically astute. We know he's very good at working with stars, very good at getting the best out of players, very good at getting the best out of teams. He's instrumental to FaZe's run of success. And I think with that fucking player base they've got there, I think maybe not the next tournament.
Okay.
You might not be E-League, but I think we're going to see a FaZe that is literally terrifying. I think it's coming. How good they can be. They might be 2, 3 in the world, but I think they get there. I think, as I said, I'm a Na'Vi fanboy. I got my own biases, obviously. G2, I've already said. I think they're on the up. SK, too good a roster. As long as they've got Cold Zero, they're always going to be relevant. So it's got to be Astralis. Yeah. Who are going to be the team that drop off.
Okay.
It's got to be.
Let's see if Cold Zero starts wearing a baseball cap a lot. But anyway, okay, serious analysis.
Yeah, okay, we're back in the room. Back in the room.
My problem with the FaZe one is this. When you said that, I agree in principle, right? If you have that much money and you've got all these players, there's no way you should be like cutting someone who didn't perform. You get the coach or whoever in who can figure out how to make them work, right? The problem with that is, remember, their coach is still Robban, which everyone forgets, right? Remember, he was the coach when the team, in fact, he was even the in-game leader at one point in time when the team could do that before Carrigan. And the problem is, I think he's been fairly lackluster as a coach. It doesn't seem like he's done anything. He didn't figure out any of the problems they had in that team. Then Carrigan came, and people rightfully gave Carrigan all the credit, basically. Like, wow, you figured out this team. You got him to be a lot better. Then you got Nico. Now you're very good. No one ever talks about Robban, but he is the coach. Like, at this point in time, that's the problem. Are they going to keep him? Are they going to make a change? Because I feel like if you go into his room and you say to him in, like, the FaZe house or whatever, you're like, listen, we've got to have a chat about the future. We want to make sure our goals are aligned. Where do you see yourself in 6 months? And he's like, coach of FaZe. And then they're like, well, yeah, I know what you mean. But, like, what do you want to happen in the next few months? He's like, don't fire me. They're like, no, I think he means he starts pulling out, like, Polaroids of his kids. Little Sammy needs that. He just needs to go to school. I'm trying to get him into Harvard or something. I don't know. I don't know the name of any schools, do I? I'm not anyway, keep going.
Right, well, good high power analysis.
Schools, mate. What am I, a nerd?
Yeah. Could have just made one up. Could have just made one up. So anyway, so that's that. That was the only question we had from our donators. So we can wrap the show up here. Obviously, as promised, we've got to read the following names that made this show possible. So Chris N. Wynn was our big donator. He put $380 out of his own pocket to bring this show back. So massive thanks to him. You're a fucking legend. Dean Tanglis, Big Hungry, of course. Who's been one of our long-term sponsors for all of the content on this channel. So much love to him. Mateusz Pietrkowski, who did ask the question, indeed. One of the Polish people who love Thorin.
Okay, fair play.
A rare breed. And Ryan Reese. Then in our $50 patrons, we've got Funky Boy. Which,
there he is.
There he is. It's your boy, Funky Boy. Tim Douglas. Saad Sawar, who you might know. He actually had a period of time where he was working over at Fnatic. So he's one of the guys. Yeah, he's a legend. And esports as well. Detlef van der Eretien, Charlie Dahlberg, Marcus Kujumpa with he's Finnish, mate. Listen, I love Finnish people, but your alphabet is a disgrace. It's too much, mate. It's all over the place. So apologies if I pronounce your name right, but I'm wrong. Sorry, but how the fuck can I pronounce it right? You know what I mean? Marcus Kujumpa, Juan Jose Gomez, Carl Oscar Garcia Firm, Jonathan Harvey, and William Southern. So shout out to all of you for making the show possible. We really, really appreciate it. And of course, to all the people who donated, even if you just chipped in $1. Without you, me and Thorin wouldn't be sat here, and I wouldn't be sat here wondering which bits we're going to have to cut out of the VOD.
Because, leave it all in.
I know that's your opinion, Duncan. I know that's your opinion. I don't want to go into the E-League offices on a Monday morning. So we got sent. Duncan saying it. It's on your channel, Richard. No, please don't send me to jail for the things Duncan said. I like it here. I like my job.
We're back. That's all that matters. We're back with a bang.
Yeah, well, fucking hell. We certainly are. So there you have it. So thanks to everyone for tuning in tonight. Obviously, thanks to Duncan for taking the time. I don't even know what country he's in at the moment, is it? But wherever he's come from.
Amsterdam. That's where I live now.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Because that was the one thing you were worried about with Brexit.
It was. That's no joke. Richard, literally, the only
Yes, hello everyone and welcome to By the Numbers. It is back. We had our Patreon goals met, so that's it. Like we agreed on our one-off Rostermania show, if there was enough money to justify getting out of bed, we would indeed get out of bed, stay all the way out of bed, and make a podcast. Me and Duncan are back to do it, so super hyped. It's a real show. We're all paid up for the month, so you're getting at least 4, unless you sneaky chargeback fuckers decide to inundate us. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, I know, yeah. So look, let's start by talking about how this show got made, because obviously it's a big shout out to all the Patreon backers. We're going to name the big donors and stuff at the end as per our agreement. And if you're one of the $100 or more donators, you will get to ask a question at the end of the show. So if you're in the Twitch chat, send those to Sam now. But just the idea of even getting this show made, as I said, the first thing I noticed, Duncan, was criticisms. Because everyone, well, not everyone, but there was a small vocal percentage of people going, why should we pay you money to make this show?
Yeah.
How greedy it is of you to demand some sort of exchange of money for time. I was like, is this fucking real life? As if we don't already have very full